Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome back to Wall Street Bullion. Our guest today is Father Emmaneul Lemelson, CIO of Lemelson Capital Management, and he is an Orthodox priest. Thank you so much for joining us, Father.
Really, the pleasure is all mine, Ivan. I was so happy to get your invite and to join you again on your incredible show. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming down. I wanted to get you down to talk about everything that's happening right now in the markets, everything that's happening in the world, all just everything. There's so many situations in the world, even in silver and gold. But first, I wanted to start off with, the markets. What are you seeing right now? What is Lemelson Capital Management seeing that's surprising you, or you just have your eye on?
It's a great question. Incidentally, we just published a new Substack article, I think yesterday. I want to say that talks about equities we're looking at. Generally, I feel probably like many people that equity markets are very overpriced, uh, perhaps, divorced from reality. So it's a little difficult to allocate capital. You don't have to always be allocating capital. We deal in common equities, frankly, on behalf of our limited partners. But there are still some good values. We had a recent history where in the last few months, if you saw some of our appearance on other financial shows, like the David Lynn report, where we talked about where we thought there was price value dislocations, and we wound up being right. I don't know, we had 8 or 9 issues we brought up, and we turned out to be pretty much right on all of them. They were Guess, Walgreens, Kohl's, Centene Corporation. We just went down the list, and glory be to God, we were right. Right now, there's a few other things we're looking at, but we're not really adding to those positions because I just think we could wait till the equity markets maybe come down. We don't know when that's going to happen, but if we have to wait, a few months or even a year, that's fine. We don't need to put money to work right now.
Why do you think there is a distortion in the equity markets right now?
Well, I think one of the main drivers is the euphoria around AI. I personally think it's a bubble. I mean, there is incredible things happening around AI. Look at the infrastructure which is being built out, or hyperscalers with these huge server farms. They're quite remarkable from an engineering perspective, if nothing else.
Hmm.
But is demand going to continue to grow at that calculus? I don't know. And then you have probably second tier and third tier players that are riding that wave to raise capital under questionable, financial metrics and so forth. So to the extent, if you want to short, you could probably find good short ideas in that area if you really want to put money to work.
Absolutely. Well, you know what, Father, there's so much talk about that AI bubble and their
Mhm.
projections. Their projections are talking about, $1 trillion in the next 5 to 10 years of growth. Do you think that's an over speculation? And could it actually, hurt the whole market if it does end up imploding?
Yeah, well, it could definitely hurt the whole market if it implodes. But to answer your question, I'm not really sure. I mean, one of the things that comes to mind, Ivan, when you ask me about that, is this idea that China is developing LLMs, large language models, at a fraction of the cost of the US. If that's true,
Mm.
if you look at Manus, for example, which is so advanced, and if it's true what they're saying about their input costs, then what are we doing in America exactly? When there's a new technology which emerges, it creates a lot of euphoria and excitement, and there's probably always going to be some grift along the way, but maybe it's a major grift right now.
Hmm.
So I just don't personally. I don't approach those things. They're too difficult to handicap the risk. It's easier to buy boring companies that pay a dividend and maybe wait for other great companies to come down. I
What?
mean, we don't buy gold and silver. I know your show is a lot about gold and silver. We don't
Right.
really trade in that, and we could talk about that too if you wanted to. But we just sit around and wait a lot of the times.
Hello, my
Why?
fellow silver and gold stackers. Please hit the like and subscribe button. It will really help the silver and gold community grow. It'll help this channel grow, and I'd really appreciate it. Back to the video. Why are you not in gold and silver with everything that's happening in the past year with all the growth in precious metals?
Yeah.
Why do you guys avoid silver or just maybe not playing the silver right now?
Yeah, it's a multi-part answer, and if I say too much, just interrupt me, Ivan, because I know you've got a great, concise show and all these intelligent questions. But first of all, as an asset allocator, the first thing a real allocator or fiduciary asks themselves is, where do you get the best rate of returns? And that's what we try to get good returns. I mean, we have our ups and downs like anyone, but generally over a long period of time, we've done well in the past.
Hmm.
Um, if you look at gold and silver, for example, over the last 50 years, since like 1975, and if you adjust properly for inflation, the real rate of return is about 1.8% over the last 50 years. The S&P 500, which is the 500 largest companies on publicly traded markets, have returned about 8%. Again, adjusted for inflation, so not nominal returns.
Right.
So you're talking about a rate of return about 4.4 times the rate of gold and silver in common stocks. Now, that if you were to invest like $1,000 in 1975 into gold and silver, it would be worth about $2,439 today, an increase of about 144%. Compounded an overall return. If it were in the S&P 500 in 1975, $1,000 would be worth about $46,901. So an
Wow.
overall rate of return of about 4,600%. So because of the power of compounding, the overall gain is extraordinary, even though it's only a factor of 4.4. So I mean, you could look at it just rationally from a mathematical point of view, because math is immutable, right? Like you could have
Mhm.
your opinion about gold, I could have mine, your listeners could have their opinions, but we could just say, well, what's really the historical performance? Because that's something we can actually know. There's a lot of things we can't know. We don't really know what a central bank's going to do tomorrow. We don't know if they're going to keep buying physical gold and silver. And then, as a priest, if you just, forgive me, I for a minute just talk as a priest. It seems to me, and this is not mathematical, it's not scientific or anything, but there's like almost three categories of investment. There is,
Mhm.
or work. There's the work we could do that's physical. Like we could go outside and we could do gardening or something. And in my mind, that's kind of good for our soul, being
Right.
outdoors, doing physical work. Then there's work that's a little bit more intellectual, like security selection and analysis. I engage in that work too. Less healthy spiritually and definitely more risks. But you could really be actively involved in a productive security. Like if you own a piece of a company, like we own a piece of this really boring company called Flour Foods. They make Dave's Killer Bread. I don't know if you ever eat it. I love their product. It pays like an 8% dividend. Their financials are okay, but I think it's
Wow.
underpriced. At any rate, I could try to get on their board if I wanted. I could go down and meet with the CEO. I do that often with publicly traded companies. So I could be active, right? I could still be active. I'm not exactly out in the fresh air and the blue sky and doing something with my hands, but I'm still being active and
Right.
productive and I'm working. If you move into just owning gold or silver, because they're not productive assets, they're just a
Right.
perceived store of wealth. I don't necessarily agree with that, by the way. Then it's like the greatest spiritual risk because what are you doing? It's almost like hoarding. Now, I know there's this vernacular about stacking, but is that spiritually healthy? I mean, there's really no work to be done. And then probably most stackers they're likely underestimating their actual carrying costs in terms of insurance and securing the physical gold and so forth. So I almost see it like this spectrum, things that are more healthy for us, things that are less healthy for us. And then, if we were to look at it from even a scriptural standpoint, while in the Old Testament there's allusions to gold and silver being associated with kings and wealth, like King Solomon, for example,
Right.
but it's also associated in the Old Testament with the creation of idols, golden idols and so forth, and the just how unhealthy gold and silver can be. By the time you move into the New Testament, if you're a Christian, for example, there's really no positive allusions to owning gold or silver, and we could go through those if you wanted to, but they're pretty profound things that are being said. So, of course, your listeners hopefully will forgive me, but I got to cover the religious aspect of it because there's something to be said for that. So, whether you're looking at it as an allocator, if you're looking at it from mathematically historical returns, or if you're looking at it from like, well, let's see what sort of the Jewish tradition says about it, and what the Christian tradition says. You've got all these things there to inform you. None of those roads lead me to saying I should buy precious metals. And
And
it does go through bubbles too. I mean, you've got the
yeah.
1980s bubble, you've got the 2011 bubble. They result in a lot of blood all over the place, when they crashed.
And Judas with silver.
That's the main one, sure. But
Yeah.
right off the bat, when Christ is born, right? What happens? The Magi come to him and they bring him gifts of frankincense, myrrh, and gold. Now people say, "Well, look, there's gold right there in the news." But what
Right.
are they doing with it? They're not storing it; they're giving it to God. And
Mm.
every other allusion in the New Testament from there on is really separating the faithful from the idea of trying to associate their sense of security and wealth with something material that will be eaten by moths or rust or pass away.
So it's not hoarding or greed, it's a gift for in that story.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
a gift to glorify
absolutely.
God. And there's allusions both in the Old Testament and the New Testament to, holy things being gold and silver in the altar in the temple, or what would eventually become the Christian altars, which resemble the Jewish temples. You see, especially in the Orthodox Church, if you walk to an Orthodox church, you see golden icons, you see golden chalices and plates. The Protestants, it drives them nuts. But it's
Hmm.
really beautiful. But they're there to glorify God. They're usually the gifts of the faithful given to the church.
Right. Yeah, that's
So very
beautiful.
different activity spiritually.
Absolutely. Now, Father, I wanted to ask you too, because I live in Canada and you're seeing grocery prices go through the roof. Inflation is just absurd, especially when you go to the grocery store. There's so many people around the world, not just Canada, who are struggling to get by or who are just, the youth who are just coming up and trying to save. What would be your guidance to them right now for anyone who's trying to take care of their family or who's just a youth, who's just, let's say, 20 years old, who's trying to protect themselves and who want to get to, follow, similar path like Lemelson Capital and try to allocate and try to grow their portfolio? What would be your guidance for them?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, to the extent you have faith, use it. Pray constantly, because my experience has been that when you start your day with prayer, your thoughts tend to be more lucid, more clear, less
Right.
cloudy. So I believe you make better discernments, better decisions when they're done prayerfully. And you can just, even if it's just 5 minutes, start your day with prayer. Try to end your day with prayer before bed if you have faith. Then you can do some practical things. You can look at your life like a personal P&L, like an income statement. Say, well, what do businesses do? They increase revenue and they cut costs, and the delta is their profit margin. So look at your life like a business and say, you could even put a spreadsheet. You can say, is there any way to increase my revenue? If not, that's fine. We leave it static. But can I take anything out of my personal living expenses to live simply? At first, it may not be that exciting because we are sort of grow up in the Western world to be consumers, and we believe that having things will make us happier. They really don't.
Right.
So if you're able to live a simple life, even a minimalistic life, you'll probably be happier. You'll lower your costs of living. And then you could even get more creative if you want. Like, for example, you could explore, if you're able, many people won't be able to do this, but if you're able, you could explore cost of living arbitrage, where you live in one place, maybe outside of Canada or the US, where the cost of living is very high. Like Italy, for example. I mean, the cost of groceries is a fraction of what it is in the United States. And they have pretty flexible visa options. You could say, well, I'm a digital nomad. I do these things remotely. I could literally live in another country where the cost of living is low, but my income is static. So there's all sorts of creative things you could do. The weather's probably better in Italy. The food, I'm pretty sure, is a lot better.
Oh
Things
yeah.
like that you could do. There's a whole scale from like not very creative or adventurous to like super creative and adventurous. But don't feel trapped and don't feel like a prisoner. And don't ever forget that you're free. The first thing God gave you is your freedom. Don't ever feel like anyone can take that away from you. You can only let other people give you the perception they've taken your freedom away. But you can do a whole lot of things. Work hard, be honest, be creative. Don't be afraid to do some adventurous things and see what it holds.
There's about $15 trillion worth of physical gold in the world sitting there costing money rather than being used. Is just absolutely insane. Monetary Metals is bringing gold back into the financial world, putting gold to productive use right now. The problem with gold, of course, in physical form is that it's heavy, it's cumbersome, it's not particularly easy to ship, and it costs money to store in a protected manner. This platform Monetary Metals created is a proven concept and allows gold to be put to productive use. So instead of sitting there costing you money, it's actually in use earning you money.
Learn how you can earn 2 to 5% in our leasing program and how accredited investors can earn up to 12% on silver paid in silver. This advertisement is not investment or financial advice. Minimum investment applies.
Holds.
Absolutely. Now, what are, I know you said you're not increasing your position on the things that you guys are looking at in the equity markets, but what are, I guess, say your top three things that you're looking at, but not necessarily increasing your position on?
Well, what I've noticed, Ivan, is that there's this incredible volatility in markets now. About, I think, like 75 or 80% of volume in markets is algorithmically traded.
Right.
So what I've found in the last couple of decades is that you can have even blue chip companies, first tier companies that have massive price swings, like 20, 30, 40%. It's just incredible. So we'll just sit around and watch and say, if there is a really big movement in something, like a big price drop, and we'll say, well, let's take a look at that. Let's study their financial history. We'll try to stay away from companies that have a loss in their income statement in the last 10 years, that have consistently grown revenues, have better than average operating and net margins. So if you can find a company with net margins of over 15%, for example, that's a really profitable company. And if they're able to do it on a regular basis, and then move that into retained earnings, because the shareholders are the ones who own that company. So now you're thinking like an owner. You're kind of working. You're beyond this. Just I'm storing stacks of gold, and it's an intellectual activity, and you're using your talents. So we'll look at things like that. And again, if you were to go through the history of some of our recent Substack articles where we appeared on shows like yours, and we talked about certain issues, and you just say like we try to put our ideas out there publicly, Ivan, so that people can poke holes and say, Father's crazy. He's lost his mind finally. Doesn't know what he's talking about. He should have bought gold and silver. He's a fool. That's fine. But then if we go back 90 days later or a year later and we've outperformed a benchmark like the S&P 500 and say, well, maybe there was something to that analysis. So we put it out there publicly, and then we go back when we do a post-mortem, we do a retrospective almost every time. So that's what we're trying to do on our Substack now. It's a nascent Substack, but I hope people are learning from it because it's very academic. We're trying to get people to think about reading financial statements, about knowing what they own, and to get away from the hallmarks of a bubble. Like, people will get upset if I say gold's in a bubble, gold or silver. In fact, I was on another show recently, and I made some pretty strong comments, and it was like 400 negative comments. I'm pretty sure they're going to come for me with a pitchfork. And I don't want to offend anyone, but the reality is, when you move from a kernel of truth, like there's a kernel of truth. The central banks are buying physical gold, that We've got problems with fiat currencies. All these reasons to buy commodities are actually at their core true. The problem is when that moves gradually to taking a kernel of truth to it becomes a price increase for the sake of a price increase. And it's no longer about true security or offsetting as a hedge.
Right.
It becomes about price increases for the sake of pricing. It becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. And then that's all people start to expect. Now, I think gold and silver, if we look at it from the hallmarks of a traditional bubble, I think it is a bubble. So
Yeah, no.
that's not, and inflation adjusted dollars is probably not as bad as 1980 or 2011, but we're getting there. And when you see an entire cottage industry emerge, Ivan, around the asset, like you watch all these podcasts, like podcasts totally unrelated, and like everyone's got a gold and silver commercial, and they're getting paid, and they're getting like a whole cottage industry of experts. They're there to reinforce your confirmation bias. That's like should be a red flag.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what a government's going to do. Like we don't know what the Trump administration is going to do, or any central banks. They're going to stop buying physical gold tomorrow. Can you imagine what would happen to the price?
Oh yeah,
So again, there's
absolutely.
what you can know, what you don't know.
No, you absolutely nailed it, Father. I totally agree with you on that. Before you go, I really want people to connect with you. I want them to connect with your Substack, Lemelson Capital. I'm going to put the links
Thank
in the
you, brother.
description.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to put the links in the description below. But where can they find you?
Yeah, well, there's the Lemelson Capital website you mentioned, where they can read our history and activism and sort of forensic accounting, uncovering frauds. That's been a big part of my work. Substack's a great place. We do a podcast. It's pretty religious though, so if you go there, it's really religious. There are a few episodes on business and markets, but I would say maybe 10%. The other 90%, you're going to get a lot of religion, but they're compelling if you like that stuff. They're very visual. YouTube, our handle's at Lemelson, my last name, Lemelson. Same thing on X. I'm pretty prolific on X nowadays, posting all the time our thoughts. And then our Substack is just substack.lemelson.com or something, whatever the URL is, you can find it easily. But Ivan, I'm so grateful that you give us a chance to have that communication with your subscribers. I'd like to think they might get something out of it. If nothing else, maybe just another view on precious metals, maybe just another view on markets. We're pretty old school. I'm not Generation X. I'm probably Generation Dinosaur, but that's okay. I think the things we're trying to impart to the viewers and to those who will listen is timeless wisdom, really, which is to be very, very cautious in markets and to
Yeah.
know what you own and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely, Father. It's been a huge pleasure having you come down and speaking to the precious metals community and the investing community here on this channel. And as the markets develop, I'd love to have you back on. But thank you so much, Father Emmanuel.
Yeah, I'd love to join you again. I mean, you've got just a tremendous show, and thank God we've got people out there like you speaking to the world.
Thank you so much, Father. Talk to you soon.